On November the 21st, 1988, the Canadian voters were summoned to the polls again, and the one key issue of that election was the free trade agreement between Canada and the United States, which still officially is in force, although the current US President Donald Trump has been critical of it, and the North American Free Trade Agreement, into which it was expanded in 1994, has been replaced by the Canada-US-Mexico Free Trade Agreement. The Liberals, led by their leader, former Prime Minister John Turner, claimed that the deal amounted to a sellout of Canada's culture, economy, society, and even largely politics to the United States. The Progressive Conservatives, led by Prime Minister Mulroney, argued that the deal would significantly increase the Canadians' economic prosperity and would open new markets to Canada's businesses. The New Democrats largely agreed with the Liberals, although they claimed that they represented real change, that the Liberals were basically just copies, watered down copies of the Progressive Conservatives. And if the Canadian voters really wanted honest and fair government and social justice, they should vote for the New Democrats. Indeed, in the early weeks of the election campaign, the election had been called in mid or late September 1988. The New Democrats were often in the second place in the opinion polls, with the Liberals in third place and the Progressive Conservatives clearly in the lead. However, given Turner's very aggressive performances in both the French and the English language debates, in late October 1988, the Liberals were briefly able to rise to the top in the opinion polls, but in the campaign's final weeks in November 1988, perhaps partly helped by the fact that one of Mulroney's closest political friends, US Vice President George Bush, had easily defeated his Democratic opponent, Governor Michael Dukakis, in the US presidential elections on November the 8th. The Progressive Conservatives were able to secure a clear, albeit a reduced, majority with about 43% of the popular vote and 169 seats. The Liberals rose marginally to 32% of the popular vote and were able to double their seats to 83. The New Democrats took about 20% of the popular vote and also gained seats, rising to 43 seats. So let's look at the results more in detail. The turnout was 75.3%. The House of Commons had been expanded to 295 members. The Progressive Conservatives received about 5,668,000 votes. The Liberals, with 31.9% of the popular vote, took about 4,205,000 votes. The New Democrats, with about 20.4% of the vote, or 2,685,000 votes, took 43 seats. What about the other parties? The most prominent of the other parties was the Western Canada, especially Alberta-based Reform Party, led by Preston Manning, whose late father had served as the long-term social credit premier or provincial prime minister of Alberta. It ran 72 candidates, none of whom were elected. Federally, it took about 2.1% of the vote. The Christian Heritage Party took 0.8%. The Rhinoceros Party, which was there just for fun, took 0.4%, as did the Greens. The Confederation of Regions Party took 0.3%, as did the Libertarians, and so forth. Brian Mulroney faced a difficult second term. In June 1990, the Meech Lake Constitutional Accord failed because the Liberal government of Newfoundland rescinded that party's or that province's approval of the accord, and since Premier Clyde Wells was not able to get the concessions that he was looking for, he refused to table the accord anymore in the provincial legislature, and Manitoba's provincial legislature never approved it in the first place because one of its indigenous or aboriginal members claimed that the accord did not address the Canadian Native people's desires for greater self-government. And then in October 1992, the Charlottetown Constitutional Accord was rejected in a non-binding national referendum, and eventually in late February 1993, Mulrooney announced his resignation, to be replaced briefly by Kim Campbell in June 1993, under whose leadership the Progressive Conservatives then fought the 1993 election campaign.